Welcome to another edition of the Magical World of G. Michael Jason podcast. And for this episode, I've got a new guest, Jason Robba, who's a musician, composer and occultist living in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. He composes music for Beyond Room 313 and appears on the Week in Strange and the Beyond Room 313 Symposium. He is a Marine Corps and Army veteran, and his interest in the occult stems from the Western mystery tradition from the works of Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons and L. Hubbard. And what a fascinating conversation it was. It went like this.
What got me into the paranormal and everything, I would say, is probably back in the early to mid 1990s when I was growing up in Southern California. My folks and I would listen to Art Bell's Coast to Coast show. Usually the replays in the morning when I was, we had this little old analog alarm clock, and it would turn on the radio sometime right before dawn, and there'd be these playbacks of Coast to Coast AM. So as I was transitioning out of my deep sleep phase into gently waking up for a couple hours before school, there was Art Bell and all these stories going on. So that was always just there in that kind of liminal state right before I woke up, physically woke up in the morning. So that just got me interested in all, aliens and the paranormal, ghosts, hauntings, everything. I always enjoyed walking up to Blockbuster and picking up the UFO VHS cassettes and, renting everything I could about strange and paranormal and horror films and everything. I just really got into that before I was even, probably about 10 years old. So, and then from that, I've just had a real interest in it when I was kind of in my late teens, early 20s. And when YouTube became a thing, I discovered that there's real interesting videos out there that people were putting out back in kind of the golden era of YouTube before everything got so censored. And I ate all that stuff up and just listened to it all the time. And that's eventually where I found Thomas Sheridan's work and got, involved working with him a couple of years ago. And I've kind of had this steady stream of paranormal, occult, spirituality, everything that I've always been interested in is just kind of amalgamated into who I am today and who I will continue to be forever.
So the whole room, the YouTube channel, and the combination of you three, how did that come together? How did that happen?
Well, Thomas had the Beyond Room 313 channel going for about a year before I started working with him. I think it was about a year or so. He made that as his premier media channel, where he had his Thomas Sheridan channel. I think there's the open source occult TV channel, which is now the Thomas Sheridan 2, Roman numeral 2 channel. And then he had Beyond Room 313, which was his bona fide, that's where everything that was going to go in that had, professional editing and, professional music and everything, that was going to be that channel for him. That is his channel for him. And he was putting out a lot of really good, he'd been putting out a lot of really good documentaries on there. He did the Liber Providence film back in, I think, 2019, somewhere in there. And I was really digging the aesthetic that Thomas was putting together. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And I'm a musician and a composer for everybody who's listening in who doesn't know who I am. I've been playing music since I was probably, about the same time frame, about 10, 11, 12 years old. And I've been writing music for about the same amount of time. So long story short, I was going to school in that time frame around 2018, 2020 time frame for music composition for film, TV, and video games. So my thing was I'd gotten out of the military. I had my Montgomery GI Bill. I was in my early mid 30s, and I wanted to go back to school to get a degree in music composition. So I was getting a degree in music composition, and I was about to be graduating in December of 2020 with my bachelor's degree. And I wanted to start working in, film, TV, and games as soon as I got done with school. So I was looking for opportunities, and I was watching Thomas's stuff, and I'm like, you know what? My kind of music, the things that I'm interested in that we're just talking about, going back to aliens and the paranormal and the occult and everything, it's like that channel was made to have my kind of music on it, the things that I'm interested in. And also, I've never been one for like big prestige of Hollywood and everything. I think I'd get really annoyed probably working in like the big professional industries. I'd rather kind of work on the independent side of things. So I'm like, I'm just going to go out on a limb and ask Thomas if he would ever like me to score some music for a film that he's working on. And I think I asked him maybe 2 or 3 times throughout kind of 2019 and 2020. And it was in 2020 on Jack Parsons' birthday on October 2nd, 2020. I messaged him. I think it was actually in a Facebook post about Jack Parsons. I said, Thomas, would you ever like to make a documentary about Jack Parsons? You could make the film, I'll compose the music. I said something to that extent. And I think he agreed right then. And we just started DMing on Facebook about it. And like, yeah, that could be an option. And, kind of feeling each other out a little bit. We'd been in correspondence a little bit for a number of years, casually on Facebook and, and Instagram. And, we just kind of figured things out there. And like, well, I'm finishing up my degree here for the next couple of months. This was October, so I was graduating in December. So we talked about that. And then as soon as I finished my degree on the last day of fall, right before the solstice, it's like, okay, here we go. We're starting production on Liber Velocity, the Jack Parsons film. So I went from school to working with Thomas on Liber Velocity, like exactly kind of what should be going on in my life. Like, okay, cool. I've always been a musician, always been a composer. Now I've got a space to put my music into and someone to work with, a partner to work with. So we made Liber Velocity and premiered that on Walpurgis Night, Beltane of 2021. So that was May 1st. It was like 3:33 in the morning. We had a premiere and me and Thomas were all excited about it. We sat around with everyone on YouTube and premiered the film. Really, really great responses and just everything. Everybody loved it. And afterwards, Timony had reached out to me and to Thomas on Facebook saying, hey, I really enjoyed what you guys did with Liber Velocity. If you ever need any help with research or anything, I'd be glad to help out. And Thomas and I talked about that. And it's like research, she's her own like person. She's got this amazing, personality and she'd do really well on camera and everything. It's like, let's have her on as a third member of Beyond Room 313 and have her host a show. That was Thomas's idea for that. So we had a Zoom meeting, the three of us. I've never met Thomas in person yet. I'll be meeting him this year at the conference, and I'd never met Timony before. So we all three got on a video conference call here on Zoom and brought Timony on board and started doing the Week in Strange. So that was in June of last year. And then we had our first show on the summer solstice. So the previous winter solstice, I started working on Liber Velocity with Thomas, and then on summer solstice, we brought Timony on for the Week in Strange and did our first show. And she's my best friend now, and we live here in Richland and host the show here down in the studio. And so that's how that all got started. And then we're working on, the three of us have worked on several projects. The Week in Strange that you all hear every Monday on Facebook, and we upload to YouTube. Yeah. And then we did the Sasquatch film, and then there's been a few other short films, and then we're working on this Atlantis film with Neil. So we've got Neil McDonald coming on, who Thomas and Neil wrote the Atlantis book together, and then the four of us are working on this Atlantis film that will be premiering in September at the Mysterious Earth Conference in the UK. So we'll finally get to meet Thomas in person, meet Neil in person. I hope you can make it out from the Czech Republic. I don't know if that's feasible for you.
We'll see. The trouble is these days is I'm looking after my 14, nearly 15-year-old daughter full time. It means that I'm not able to get away like I used to, unfortunately. It's really strange, because as I said, I spent 17, 18 years in Texas, and I've been here now 15 years. And I've just sort of left a trail across the globe. I've got two sons in Texas, one in Scotland, a daughter here.
Yeah.
And I feel bad because I hardly ever see them, especially this last few years because of all the disruption and COVID and everything else. But we seem to do all right, so it's probably fine. Getting involved in the magic and the paranormal seems to open these doors to relationships with people that where the actual proximity of that person doesn't seem to matter very much. So you talk about you've never met Thomas, but you've been working together for a couple of years or more. I wrote a book with a lady called Sue Vincent on the hexagram as an esoteric symbol, and we knew each other. She passed away, unfortunately, last year, I think it was. We'd known each other for about 15, 16, 17 years, and I didn't meet her until year 12.
Yeah, right.
And by that time, we'd already written a book together and done all kinds of stuff. And I just think it's quite bizarre that this sort of genre allows you to work with people remotely and somehow connect and make a bond but you've never physically met them. It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's real interesting too. It just makes me think like our lineage with Hermeticism and with the occult and magic. It's like we've been working with beings that we're not in physical contact with for eons. So it's like it seems natural that the internet and social media would be something that occultists, magicians, mystics would gravitate towards to meet each other and feel that confidence of working with someone who lives in a different time zone. And we've been doing this kind of thing for eons with people scrying. So it's like, we're all scrying each other here on our laptops and phones and everything, and very comfortable. Just like, oh, okay, he's another one of me. He's part of this big spiritual family that we're all part of. So, yeah. Which reminds me, you talked about not being able to get over to the UK for the conference. I would love to make a trip over there to the Czech Republic to visit you someday, because I'm Robba, even though it's an Italian last name. I used to have one B. We're Czechoslovakia, my family. My dad's side of the family. So Thomas talks a lot about people going to places to have that get kind of spiritually activated. I've always had a real draw towards Prague and the Czech Republic and all of Bohemia, and I feel like that would be one place that would help kind of.
Well, hey, you're very welcome. And Thomas, was it the last time we did a chat? I think Thomas was talking about. Yeah, he just threw it out like try to do a film about dowsing in Czech Republic or something. So maybe we could do all of that all at the same time.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, we bring the cameras, and I think he talked a little bit about John Dee, because what did John Dee and Ed Kelly?
Well, John Dee and Edward Kelly were here, and because the emperor of whatever state entity it was at the time, probably it wasn't Czechoslovakia, but it was the Austrian, Hungarian probably, or something like that empire. The emperor in Prague, he was really into alchemy. So he surrounded himself with alchemists, and those two guys were in Prague for a while. And they were also in a place called Trebon at the castle there for a couple of years. And of course, John Dee went back to the UK and sort of passed his remaining years there. But Edward Kelly, I think, died trying to escape from the jail in Prague Castle. I think he was a bit of a scurrilous individual,
yeah,
to say the least. I always have to laugh at how he managed somehow to convince John Dee to share his wife.
Yeah, I know those stories are wild, and it's like all that stuff kind of echoes through time. There's always like strange magical partnerships like that, whether it's John Dee and Ed Kelly or Jack Parsons and Ron Hubbard kind of having a real similar thing. It's like they're kind of that same kind of magical partnership always ends up,
right.
Throughout.
And John Dee seems to have been a sort of stand-up, sort of serious sort of guy, and Edward Kelly was a bit of a charlatan by all accounts. A bit of a knew how to work his way around and through, I think. So
yeah.
But I was in Trebon just a couple of weekends ago.
Yeah.
And I'll be back there next week because I was looking for the major line that we're trying to trace across the Czech Republic, and we found two others, and we found this beautiful place with a vortex and an energy center, and so I'll be back there. I've got next week off, so I'm going back.
I've got dowsing rods upstairs, and I don't have a sense of how to use them yet. I've watched a few YouTube videos, but do you have any videos on dowsing tutorials on your channel?
I have one that I made. I can send you the link later, but
yeah.
I mean, my advice is don't get too technical. I mean, it's all from here anyway, So basically, all these things are doing, I think, is just accentuating unconscious movement. So there's all kinds of advice about how to use these things, but essentially all I do is, and I don't use two anymore, I just use one. I just walk along. And I'll be talking, I could be having a conversation about, a soccer game that I'm going to see next week. And I'm just walking along, and eventually it will do this. And that means I'm in an energy line. So then I'll validate it with two just to make sure. And I'll count it out to see how wide it is and plot it on the map and then start trying to track it. You hear advice about it's like a form of meditation. It is, but to me, it's an empty-minded meditation. It doesn't matter what I'm doing consciously. It's the subconscious mind is focused on this, and if I'm empty-minded, I do it better, but sometimes obviously you can't be empty-minded for hours and hours walking through the country lanes. And I've even got to the point where I can actually dowse in the car, the bigger lines, so long as I'm driving less than 60 kilometers an hour, I can pick them up with about probably 70% accuracy. So just park on the side of the road, dash back, check.
Yeah, I like that. I would imagine you're going by something and it'll just do this, it'll, as you go by it, right? It'll just swing to it.
Well, the ones that we're tracking, the ones that I'm tracking right now are 90 paces wide. So that's about, what's that, about 30 meters, something like that, or 30 yards wide. So it's fairly sizable. So if you're traveling at about, 60 kilometers, about 40 miles, 35 miles an hour, something like that, there's sufficient there to drag the rod. And you can also use them a little bit for answering questions. And the way you do that is you start by figuring out what's yes by asking a question like, am I Gary? Okay, so that's yes. Am I Alison? That's no. Right. And then, you can ask questions. And I do this when I'm interrogating the lines themselves. I also have tried, to answer for my 14-year-old daughter, does X, Y, and Z is going to be his boyfriend, that kind of thing.
Right.
I keep telling her the problem is that the more emotionally involved I am with the answer, the less certain I am of the result. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and then sometimes you might need to just pull them out a little bit. See, you shouldn't do it.
No, he doesn't.
Right. It's interesting. So, okay, then I've got a good sense of that then, or a decent enough sense of it, because I'm kind of familiar myself with the concept of unconscious thoughts or unconscious impressions having a physical reaction. Going back to my origin story a little bit, both of my parents were Scientologists, and they had me as a kid, so I was raised around Scientology. And as most people maybe know or don't know, that's the way the e-meter works. It's not like a lie meter, like all the bullshit on Netflix says, all the propaganda that goes against Scientology. It's not like a lie detector. What it does is it's a galvanic skin response meter. So what it does is it actually measures the amount of resistance that you have within your body. So on that dial, like a dead male body will read at one amount, and a dead female body will read at another amount of resistance. And the more stressed one gets, the more one is holding a thought within them about a trauma or something, that resistance within their skin will rise. So you can think about a tragic incident that occurred in your life, and you'll see that resistance raise up from your body actually resisting the thought of that thing. And as you get relief from talking about that or coming to a conclusion about it, you'll see the resistance fall back closer to a resting resistance, like what the dead body would have. So as someone gets more stressed out, the resistance increases. As they relax, the resistance decreases. When you're in like a nice casual chat like this, there's a nice little sine wave that the meter does, where you're in a balanced state where you're not stressed, and you're just chilling out. So it's a very similar thing where with an e-meter, you can get a read on something. Like you can have a list of names. It's like, okay, who took the last cookie last night? Was it Thomas? Nothing. Was it Timothy? No. Was it Gary? Oh, Gary took the cookie last night, and you just, that like, okay, we all have a psychic connection to the universe around us and to all people. And we intuitively know certain things. So it's like with that example about who stole the cookie, that's a really silly example. But if it were something a little bit more interesting, like, okay, who was the emperor that blah, 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 did something, and that information's out there, you can tap into it and put down a list of things. And on that list, it'll get a reading where that resistance that your body has will drop down a little bit. So it's a very similar thing to what you're talking about with dowsing rods, or you could use, pendulum. Yeah. Where you were talking about your daughter and boyfriends and stuff, and you could do the list of boyfriends or something and see which one of them could be a problem. And that one's got a big read on it, or all of them read. Just forget them all. Or which one would be the right boyfriend? One of them would read. But as a crude way of explaining how the e-meter works, essentially it works like that. So I myself am familiar with that. So now that I know that little bit of information, same thing as looking for reads on a meter. Yeah, I mean, don't stress. There's a lot of guidance about dowsing, and it's like protect yourself. I mean, obviously you should protect yourself because you're opening yourself up. But it's made out to be, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think it's made out to be a lot more difficult than it really is. I think it's very intuitive.
and you just need to open yourself up. Perhaps you need to think about also what you're looking for. So I'm looking for water, or I'm looking for earth energies, or I'm looking for gold, or whatever that, you need to obviously have that in mind. To me, it's the easiest thing in the world. And I've taken friends and girlfriends out, and some of them can do it immediately and get the same result as I do. Others can do it, but the results vary, but very consistently. And I'll come back to that. And others just can't do it at all. And I can't understand why they can't do it, because, about 20% just cannot do it at all.
Yeah.
But the most interesting thing is that, like my partner I've been doing work with, Eva, she will consistently find, if the lines come in pairs, and we call them male and female. They're not really the negative positive, but they're not really, but that's what we do. So I always find the female line about 2 meters before she does. And she always finds the male line about 2 meters before me. So it's almost as if there's like a male-female affinity. So for her, the lines are about 4 meters thicker if they're male and 4 meters thinner if they're female than for me. And it's always the same.
Yeah, that's just real interesting, like what I was talking about with the way the E-meter reads differently for a man than it does for a woman. And yeah, there's got to be something about that. I think it was where, a dead female body reads 2, a dead male body reads 3 on the tone arm is what it's called on a Scientology E-meter. But okay, now that I know that little bit of information, I could go out there and douse like that now, knowing that it's so yeah, there's the videos out there that make it way too complex. And I get what you mean too about some people can't do it, because there's people have talked before kind of about the psychic censor, CENSOR, where there's that censorship that comes in where people, if they get an impression of something psychically, they immediately damn that thing off, or they have a dam there.
Well, not only that, but they ruin it for everybody else as well.
They block everybody else's psychic impressions. Yeah, and you can't have those people in your space. And then there are people who are kind of amplifiers. I feel like when you're around them, muses and friends that help you feel inspired. Like being around Thomas and Timony, they both inspire me to do more with my music and with my art and the things that I do. So it's like they amplify a signal that's already there. But yeah, I get the concept now. So I got the rods upstairs, and I'll figure out, what's my yes, what's my no, and then just got it.
Go do it. I think the more the merrier. The more the merrier. Yeah. Have you had any really strange, memorable, paranormal type experiences that really made you question everything and drove you in this direction, or has it just been an interest?
I wish that maybe I should phrase this carefully. I've always wanted something paranormal like that to happen, but I really haven't. I've lived, my life has been incredibly mundane as far as strange things happen. People will make their life into it, like they'll use a film category, where the drama, comedy or something. My life has always kind of been like a tragic comedy, and there aren't too many paranormal things that have occurred in my life. My life is incredibly funny, and it's incredibly tragic at times. So, but for me, I've just always had a passion for this stuff. Like I was saying, I was raised with Scientology, so it's like I've never had the Christian mindset. I've never had the Abrahamic mindset. Being raised with the concept of reincarnation, for instance, and looking at things from a different aspect than most Americans, most people on Earth look at things from. So I've always, extraterrestrial life, demons, entities, I've always had those things as possibilities in my life. I've always been very curious about them. I'm not one of those people who goes around and just thinks everything is nuts and bolts spaceships and stuff, but I've had my mind open to, there's the possibility of aliens, there's a possibility of extra dimensional beings. We were talking about the Art Bell call that happened on September 11th of 1997, where that dude, his last name is Glass. He calls.
Yeah, so I listened to that again today.
Yeah. But it's like stuff like that. It fascinates me. And there's certain things that immediately like click for me, and there are other things that don't click. I'm like, yep, that's bullshit. That's whatever. No. Okay, yep, that reads to me. It's something that I feel here that's like, so that call, and I actually didn't hear it. I didn't know about that one until I was in the Marine Corps around 2011. I just totally never got that one, because the social media and everything wasn't around in 1997. So like, unless you heard that show or heard Art talk about it on one of the other broadcasts. So I heard that show when my buddy Bustillos in the Marine Corps is like, Robba, check this out, man, because he knew I was into aliens and shit. And I'm like, we listened to it in the car a number of times. I'm like, yeah, that's right. They're interdimensional. They're not. Yeah, there probably are other physical beings out there, but they aren't coming here. The ones that are coming here that are the problem, yeah, they're interdimensional. Thomas will talk about
that resonates with me too, because I got the liminal people, liminal entities, and I talk about it being like almost a set of wavelengths side by side, up and down, higher and lower frequencies, and it definitely resonates with me that they would be intradimensional or some other frequency impinging on our reality,
or using another frequency as a carrier wave to transmit them, to transport them. And I guess transmit, they would almost
transport.
Like if you think about going across space and time, it wouldn't be feasible for them to fly over here in a saucer, for instance. The way that a lot of the mainstream ufology says it's like. But if they were to transport themselves as a being, as a spiritual being outside of time and space, the best way would be through a wave, because that wave, if you have a long enough wavelength, or whatever it is, I don't want to get into the physics of it because I don't know that well enough. But you like you're saying, there's a frequency that they could put themselves in here through. And with what just happened on the 5th of July a couple of days ago, with CERN doing their thing, and some of the other strange occurrences, like Thomas talks about 9/11, Stargate all the time. Like I would think that if there were to be others, aliens, if you will, just meaning elsewhere, these interdimensional beings, they would come through some sort of frequency, and they wouldn't come here as bodies. In Sun Tzu's Art of War, I forgot which axiom it is, but it talks about, rather than destroying your enemy's army, they're destroying your enemy's military and destroying their infrastructure, you take their army and their infrastructure for your own. So for an effective invasion, so to speak, the best way to do that on a planet would be to take over the existing bodies and the existing infrastructure and just adjust it to work for their way of life. So I would imagine, I talked about recently that that life in the universe is a game of chess, not a game of checkers. Even though people kind of think of it as a game of checkers, it's like these chess moves probably take several generations for a move to be made. And I think we're in the middle of one move on the chessboard going into place and something clicking, whether we're in check or checkmate right now. I kind of feel like we're close to the last, the king on our side, if you want to have there be sides of people on Earth or people in this universe, and then the others, whatever you want to call them, playing the other side of the board. I think we might be close to something like that, where not to be all doom and gloom, but I think that might be the intention of these liminal ones, or of these aliens, these extra dimensionals, would be to come here and take over the bodies. Because as I've said in many other instances, my philosophy is that we have a body, but we, the two people communicating right now are spiritual beings inhabiting this body. We aren't bodies that have a soul. We are souls that have a body.
Yeah.
So life in many different incarnations. So my whole point with that is that I think that their tactic is to knock us as spiritual beings out of these bodies and walk into them and take them over themselves. So lowering people's awareness level down so that they're rendered inert in their own body, and then bringing in these other beings into this universe and here onto Earth to take over these bodies that exist here on Earth and take over the infrastructure. And I would say that their philosophies, their religions, and everything have infiltrated into our reality for probably the last 2,000 years or something. And it's just, that's been this chess game of this iteration of civilization here on the planet. And maybe this has happened eons and eons over and over again, and we're just having this happen again. I kind of tend to think that there's a cycle that this happens in, and we're in another one of these cycles right now, and we're at this juncture point of being able to do something about it. And I think all of us who are here, that like you talked about, talking over the internet and writing books together over vast distances, all of us who are doing that have an opportunity to do something about this, not get out there and make a some political statement or get out there and be activists. But I think there's something we can do on the quantum level, on the magical level, to block this invasion from occurring. I don't think anybody needs to wake up the masses. I think maybe if there were, enough of us magicians who were working together, we could build enough of a psychic defense by kind of, the way I look at it, is programming the collective unconscious of mankind to block out their frequency. So there may be 5 of us, 10 of us, 20 of us could do it for the entire human species on Earth, getting in there and programming on the epigenetic level so that they can't walk in.
It's interesting idea, and just thinking about some of the stuff that I've come across here with the Dowsing. There's the Templar Church in Jindřichův Hradec. I can never quite pronounce it right because it's got a weird R sound. Jindřichův Hradec, and it's like a 12th century church. It's got weird artwork on the wall, and of course it's attracted a lot of interest from Templar treasure seekers who think it's a code, and you can understand where the treasure's hidden and all this kind of stuff. And we approached it slightly differently, because as we looked at these strange designs, they look like sound patterns in many instances, and yet there were these sort of almost gargoyle type images as well. So they got these images, and one of them is holding up a hand with like, I think it's maybe 3-4 fingers like that. And there's another one where he's sort of laid on his back. He's got some kind of diamond. He's naked. He's got a diamond on his forehead about here, and he's pointing to the tile next door. And when you look at the tile next door, it looks like a sound pattern. And when you look at that sound pattern and try to compare it, guess what? It's a solfeggio frequency, 952 hertz. And when you play that sound inside the church at the vortex of the energy lines, it amplifies the effect of the energy lines to the point where I couldn't stand it. I had to stop the sound. And we found 2 frequencies in there, 852, I think it was, and 741, both solfeggio, right?
Yeah, so 852 or 952, would that be?
Was it 952 or 852 and 741? I think there are 2 more frequencies hidden in the symbolism in the church, and I just haven't been able to figure it out. Hopefully I will eventually. But then my partner Eva came out with this amazing thought driving there last weekend or the weekend before. She said, Gary, what if in the original bells in these churches had those frequencies? So when the bells rang, those frequencies would ring out over the land and affect the people in the local area. So there you are talking about blocking interdimensional invasion through a frequency. Yeah, and I'm sat here thinking, well, what if the Templars, for example, were an organization that were working to stop that from happening using certain frequencies, and they built these massive churches on these energy vortexes. They used the bells and they used chanting to basically emit these frequencies to stop this, to sort of defend the realm, so to speak.
No, or I would think to take it just one step deeper, the frequencies would do something within people's physiology to,
yes, absolutely,
to get them into we were talking about meditative states and everything earlier. I'd imagine that what it could do is it could open up some sort of something within someone that does the blocking itself. So it's like that frequency. I want to say that's got to be like a B flat right above middle C, is what you're talking about, that 842 or 942. And I'm just thinking that it reminds me, I think somebody said that's why, all those Brock Zarathustra, the Richard Strauss piece of music that they use in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
That C that's really, really low down there is supposed to be what the sound is that's coming from the center of our universe or of our galaxy. And I have heard before that it's either a C or a B flat. And if there is a frequency that ties all the celestial bodies and the planets together, perhaps it is something, there's a frequency that is native to our universe. And if we amplify that frequency enough, that might, strengthen up a natural defense that exists there. So it's all kind of,
it's 852. I just looked it up. 852 and 741.
So 440 is A4, which is the A below middle C. So 880 would be an octave above that. And you said 882?
852.
852. So that's a little bit lower than an A.
But you got to be careful here, because another aspect to this is, and again, I need to check all my facts. I know for sure that all of the note frequencies were played with in relatively recent past. And there's actually, if you go out and look at the old solfeggio stuff and start looking at some of those websites, there is a theory, and it's fairly interesting, that this was deliberately done by the cabal that runs the planet. And they shifted everything so that rather than it being the harmonic, beneficial, maybe protective or defensive sound that it should be, it was off and discordant. And therefore, they've disrupted out the Templars' attempts to basically, engineer a solution, if you want. And this is all out there on the internet. And it was something I discovered when I was doing this church work.
Yeah.
And so you got to be careful, because you may be using the current assignment of notes to frequencies. And in fact, I believe if you go back to when the solfeggio frequencies were primarily used, that was different by about 9 megahertz or something.
Yeah, and you know what the good thing is about that? People talk about A440 a lot, and there actually aren't too many instances of 440 out there. If you anything that you hear that's got guitars in it nowadays, any rock, metal, is usually a 436. They naturally tune down quite a bit. So if you go to if you have like an electric keyboard in your house and you see that a piece of music is an E, and you play your E while they're playing along, you'll notice that the E on your keyboard is higher than the E that they're playing, because they're playing down like A436, A432, just like the Verdi A was A431. And then most orchestras in the US do A442. And then over there, and you're part of the planet, they're all at 442, 444. I've seen up to 447. So that A440 is what a lot of instruments were standardly tuned to, like all of our electronic keyboards and stuff. But getting out there in the real world, there's a whole thing up to about 447, all the way down to about 431. And there aren't too many recordings out there that are actually 440. So I've heard that one before too, but I'll say, because I won't tell you I won't tell the world what frequency I tune my music to, but I do detune it at a 440 when you listen to my stuff that's there on Beyond Room 313. I've been using this tuning logic for a while now, and there's Pythagorean tuning, and there's all kinds of different tuning that uses different temperaments of the relationship between notes. So I get what you're saying there, but I've heard that one too about them deliberately changing the A440 frequency around World War II. But the good thing is there's hardly anything that uses dead on A440 anymore.
The other thing is the solfeggio frequencies, of course, are supposed to correlate with the chakras, and if you're into numbers, all of the solfeggio frequencies will sum to 3, 6, and 9. So this 3, 6, 9 pattern is embedded in the solfeggio frequencies as well. It just struck me as you were talking that potentially, as you say, we've had this battle in the past, and maybe that's what the Templars were really up to. Who knows? But the problem with all of this stuff is you can sit back and think, am I really putting myself in my own echo chamber now? Am I convincing myself further? Am I doing what I accuse the opposition of doing, but just in the other direction?
Yeah. Ask the rods. Yeah. That's a good thing. Yeah. You can ask the rods that about a specific thing. Like for me, my intuition is saying, like, with this thread we're following, we might be getting a little off center. So maybe, we find where the center was and come back to that one. I've got a good intuitive sense of that. With working with the meter, I've gotten to the point where I don't need to use the meter. I can just intuitively know once there was a path that was tracking, and then you make a 1 degree course correction, and then by 1 degree turns into many degrees off course correction. So it's like you can find where, okay, there was part of it that might have went a little bit off. And I think for me, intuitively, it was around the bell time frame where we're talking about that frequency. Somewhere in there, we can lead it back to where the center is. But the echo chamber thing, no, I totally know what you mean by that. And that's why you can, with a specific thing, you could probably make a list of it and go, okay, all right, rods, all right, let's look and see, where did the thing get off, or where can I find a lead back to?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my opinion about that. We know we can always check ourselves and see intuitively where we lost the thread, or where we individually lose a thread on something. But I think there is something to a solution that can be done about these extra dimensional entities. And I don't think it's very easy to talk about this stuff because I want to say, so I'll pivot a little bit. I want to say that these other beings have deliberately programmed the human genome to block our minds and our communication center from being able to easily access a way to deal with them. So I've had these heavy conversations with people before about what can be done. And there's always this like frustration of like, we're right on top of it, but this doesn't work.
I got to tell you, I'm definitely thinking it's all to do with sound and frequency, because everything is sound and frequency, and the 369 and this solfeggio stuff and this. I mean, I think I've in your podcast, I think I've mentioned a couple of examples, but these energy lines really send you on a chase sometimes. I mean, a couple of weekends ago when we went off to Trebon, it was based on an objective view that if you followed the azimuth of the line, then it should pass through Trebon. And why not? Because Trebon, the alchemists were there, John Dee was there. It's a historical town. Surely that's where we're going to find the line. So we go there and we douse all over town, and there's nothing. It's dead, energetically, totally dead. And we're like, this is ridiculous. But we'd gone, we it was a camping weekend. We pitched the tent just outside of town on this lake. She went for a swim. We had a nice evening, a couple of beers, got up the next morning and decided to walk around the campsite with the two dogs. And I took the dowsing rods. And I'm like, this can't be right. We've got two 90-pace wide lines. And guess what? They're running right through the bloody tent.
Yeah. Right where you put the tent. Yep. Intuition knew. Yeah.
And this happens all the damn time. It's like whoever the powers that be are, they're like, sort of kicking you in the head saying, stupid, wake up.
Yeah. I do tend to think with the frequency stuff that Thomas talked about this on the show last week, that perhaps there's something within the human genetics that there's a code somewhere in genetics that makes humans attached, human beings, the composite, human body, human mind, all this physiology, that there's something genetic that ties us to us as a spiritual being, that there's a genetic link there. And perhaps if there's this link there in the DNA, that if that link were somehow altered, it would phase us out from our body. So if we need to have this link here and to say, the others want to come in and link up with that link in our DNA has to be kept strong. And that's obviously got to be a frequency thing. So if that frequency is ever broken or aberrated, there'll be a loosening up of us, and the walk-in can happen. So perhaps there's something about frequency with all the grid lines on the planet and all the grid lines within the body, the meridian lines, I've been looking a lot into pressure points and all of that recently. Mm-hmm. So it would make sense that perhaps all of that does correspond, and we are out of alignment on the grand scale of the meridians within the body, the meridians within the earth, the meridians within the solar system, and keep going out. Perhaps all of those are disjunct, or they're trying to make them disjunct. Maybe they are in tune and they're trying to make them go out of tune. Perhaps everything yeah.
I don't know. I was reading comments on your last video and other places, and I see a lot of something's off. Yeah. And I too have the sense something's off, something's not right, and I can't put my finger on what it is. I just know that when I get out into nature and follow these lines, it doesn't seem so off anymore. But it seems to me that all my life I've been waiting for this to happen. Dreams as a kid and experiences growing up, and a little bit of automatic voicing, stuff, telling people, friends in a discotheque in Hull drinking beer, suddenly
yeah, I know
and I'm talking automatically. But I've just always felt like I was waiting for a time when there would be a big challenge and we'd have to stand up and be counted. And I don't know whether it's wishful thinking or drama, but I just sometimes everything seems to have led to this point, and things are happening at such a pace that I never in a million years believed would ever happen.
Right.
The idea that people would willingly take an experimental, untested drug that doesn't work,
right, exactly.
And then persecute people that didn't want to the point where they're willing to put them in closed prison type facilities, and we're going down that horrible path again. I would never have believed that if you'd have told me that 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And yet here we are at that juncture. It seems to me that there's a whole bunch of people like you guys, like me, and people, and a lot of other people I know and have worked with, all trying to make some kind of sense in a magical way of what's going on, and trying to, almost in the dark, figure out a way to defend and protect and survive,
I know exactly what you mean, and especially when you said the thing about, holding a beer and talking to friends and the automatic speaking thing. Like, I can't tell you how many, I could probably tell you there's probably a few dozen times that's occurred for me, where I'm sitting around with good friends drinking beer, and then just flow state, it just kicks in and I start talking about this stuff. Like, I can just think there's one instance that popped out when you said that, when I was in the Army at the time. So I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and I was in the Army for 3 years. And I was at Fort Jackson at Magruder's, the bar that's on base there. And I was talking to my buddy Brent, my buddy Luke, and there's a few other guys around, and my ex-wife was there too. And we were drinking a few pitchers of beer, and I just, I was always going off on esoteric bents and everything. And they would get really, they found it endearing, but sometimes they'd be like, all right, Jason, take it back a little bit. But there's just one time in particular, I remember holding everybody's attention about it. And there's something like this, I was talking about, there is something that's coming like this. And this was back in 2014, probably summer of 2014. I want to say in August. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. And what we're talking about with dowsing and, using your unconscious, or using the collective unconscious sometimes to get a reading, whether you're using rods, a pendulum, an e-meter, whatever it is, a Ouija board. When people are doing this and you're talking about frequencies, perhaps, I'm gonna throw another idea out here. When the naked dude with the diamond pointing at the frequency, perhaps he's talking about, there's a frequency out there that you can psychically connect with, that taps you into the grids within you, that taps you into the grids within all of mankind and the earth. So all the answers to all of life exist within there. We're all connected on that psychic level.
Mm-hmm.
We can read each other's minds sometimes. We can read each other's thoughts. We can read the thoughts of mankind sometimes when we get into that state. And perhaps he's talking about the solution. If you need to find the solution, you need to tap into that frequency and go there within you. I would say that the answers to all the mysteries of the universe exist within each and every one of us. It's just that we have that psychic censorship there. No matter how spiritually advanced we are, if we're in a human form with a human mind, a conscious, everyday waking mind that's looking at life from that level, only at the tip of the iceberg, the mind gets in the way sometimes of looking at what's under the surface. And if there's a way to tap into that frequency psychically, we can find the solutions to what we're talking about here. If there is an extra dimensional invasion occurring, perhaps the answer to that is going through that frequency, tapping into the grids within us, within all of mankind, the universe and everything, and know, okay, that's where the secret weapon is hidden, that only we can access, that we have to go within to find it. And maybe that's what they're talking about. And you're talking about the Templars and the bells and all of those structures being built on these nodes, and then using the bells to resonate out, to amplify, like to send a pulse, like the way that we've got these nodes within our body to send pulses out.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's a way to get people to go into that noetic state and bring the answer forward. So maybe there are keys out there that are within the frequency that can unlock gateways and doors into hidden weapons, so to speak, of how to defend us, how to defend not just the biome, but us as spiritual beings, that we own this universe. This motherfucker's ours, like whoever these are coming out from elsewhere, this is not their domain. This is our domain. Right. We are the protectors of this universe, of this physical domain. I'm getting emotional, so I know this is true.
Do you know Rory Duff? Okay, so Rory Duff is a guy that is another geologist, actually, amazingly enough, and he's been dowsing for much longer than me. And his work is pretty good, pretty amazing. I mean, you guys look him up. I think I suggested him as a guest to Thomas, actually. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm imagining that, but he would make a great guest anyway. And he is now engaged in basically building a database of all of these mega energy line vortexes around the world. And he's trying to encourage people to go to these places on the 4 key dates of the year, the equinoxes and the solstices, and meditate love, because he believes, and because the planet is going through a place in space where we're less protected from radiation, etc., and well, not radiation, but the cosmic rays, and because the pole seems to be going into switch mode as well. So we're like, there's so much going on in terms of energetics that are affecting us, and it's affecting the lines. And so he thinks that the period around the equinox or the solstice is no longer one day, but it's getting broader. It's like 14 day period around that time when the energy vortex and the meditative work really can start to impact reality. So he's kind of working in a very similar direction, and he's really proactive. I mean, he's trying to build a database and help direct people to these sites to go and do this meditative work, and definitely someone you guys should look up.
Absolutely. Yeah. On a personal level, I agree with him about there's got to be something about going to those spots. And now where the only thing that feels out to me about it is the meditating on love. I feel like there's something deeper to it than that, where maybe that's a state of mind that can get you into there. But what I was just talking about with there being secret keys that open up, maybe there are parts of you that can get unlocked when you go there on those dates, those times, and get into the right state of mind. There would be parts of our collective unconscious that are, in vaults, so to speak, that are protected, so that when people are drunk, when people are tripping on something, when people are dissociated, that those parts of us can't be accessed, because there's secret defense mechanisms in there that keep us tethered to the bodies. Like there's got to be, just like everything in nature has its own defense mechanism. Animals have, certain animals have their claws, certain animals have their venom.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of defense mechanisms out there. So us as humans, we're very mentally, psychically, we're not, we don't have claws, we don't have very sharp teeth, but we've got a lot of stuff up here in our mind and in our heart that can, as our defense. So there's got to be secret, hidden away weapons and defense mechanisms, offensive and defensive, that are there within us that perhaps have been deliberately, like I was talking about earlier, curtailed or hidden away from us.
Yeah.
And maybe those keys on those dates with the right frequency can unlock those things to see just what's in there. And maybe some of it will need some sort of, to gather that intel, to go in there and see, okay, what is it objectively? Like, to be a good intelligence gatherer, you need to go out there and just gather the intel, look at it objectively, don't put any evaluation onto it, just get the raw facts. What do you see, what do you perceive, bring it back, copy it all down, and then if someone else analyzes it, or you look at it in a unit of time and analyze without any emotional connection to it, might be able to find what that information is. But I think that's what might be needed with these people who are doing this kind of psychonautic experiences. Go out, gather the information, and yep, everybody's going to put their little bit of spin on it. And just like John Dee and Ed Kelly had their own little spin of like how much of what they pulled through is actual factual, and how much of it is, Ed Kelly's bullshit, how much of his own, insanity. Everybody's got their own brand of it that they put on whatever they're scrying. I've seen that, with what Hubbard scryed, how much of it is what he pulled through, and how much of it is his own stuff. And it's like he had his own experience there with Jack Parsons when they did the Babylon working. And I would say Dianetics and Scientology is a very effective map of the human existence, not just the mind, but the being and everything. And it's like you can look at it and go, if you know anything, if one knows anything about Scientology and one knows anything about the Kabbalah and everything, it's like, holy shit, this dude mapped out the human condition in a 20th century parlance from, someone with his mindset of being a naval intelligence officer who served in World War II, born in 1911, was a science fiction writer. So it's like you take that persona of Ron Hubbard and you let him be the scryer. Yeah, there's going to be that persona of Ron Hubbard that's projected.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
But it's like you can use that little bit of a filter and step back and go, yeah, there's still a tremendous amount that he brought through, and the techniques that he used, and the way he developed that meter to help, like we're talking about dowsing rod, do it in a very way. It's like, yep, he had a lot of real genius insights that came through there when he had his scrying experiences, when he and Jack Parsons were scrying the aethers. So I think that's got to be done when people do these scrying sessions, these psychic intelligence gathering sessions. The data just has to be recorded and looked at. Just what do we see, what do we perceive, go in there. And like if somebody sees a light, for instance, and it's coming towards them, just say there's a light coming towards me, and not say, oh, there's a divine being coming towards me and it's love. It's like, nope, that's an evaluation of it. Just look, there was a big light that looked, it went from my peripheral vision all the way to the side, and then it got smaller as it got closer, whatever the information is, and just report that. And then go back and look at, oh yeah, that was probably an entity coming towards me or something like that. I'm putting hypotheticals.
Yeah, no, I understand. A sort of scientific approach, basically.
Initially, yeah, just to gather the raw information, and then as we analyze it, we can look at it from a perspective of this or a perspective of that. Thomas will have his way of looking at it. Timony will have her way of looking at it. You'll have your way of looking at it. I'll have my way of looking at it. The people here on YouTube will be able to go, oh yeah, I see a this in it. And we can go through and just find, okay, there is some truth in here once we start analyzing the intel gathered. So that's why, like, the whole New Age community and everything, there's so many problems that get brought forward because they put their own, like, they color it as it's coming out.
It's impossible not to. And I've always thought that the reason why a lot of magical work is about understanding yourself and working on the self is because the self gets in the way, and you've got to be Dynarod and clear out the drain.
Yeah, the conscious everyday mind, the self is like what's there without the personality, but the personality can get in the way.
And I worry about that a lot. The couple of books I've written that are more magical, the Mystical Hexagram, for example, I spent a lot of time trying to, like a scientist, trying to validate it by finding references, by finding other instances. And then Sue, the lady I was working with, she said to me one day, she said, you know what, Gary? She said, some of this stuff you're not going to find anywhere because it's coming through you. And some of it's going to be you, and some of it's going to be something good. And you're not in a position to discriminate between the two. So just put it down on paper, let other people decide.
Yeah.
And I in the end, I thought, yeah, that's probably the right approach, because otherwise I'm going to screw it up by trying to overanalyze it, tear it apart, and I'm not capable of doing that. So I'll just put it down, put it out there, and people can make of it what they want. Yeah.
Yep.
That's another approach.
Yep. And I'll take that one step further and say that's why I think these chess games take a few generations per move, because if you think of it, like if you did research in one incarnation and you copied up that all down, that body passes, that personality passes, but that, like an alchemist, that distilled experience, that prima materia that you gathered and you bring down into your philosopher's stone from that incarnation, that comes with you and drips out of you, out of your composite beingness from one incarnation, you take that philosopher's stone into your next incarnation, and you have all that experience that was condensed down, and then it comes into your next iteration of research and your next body and your next personality. And you go out and with that bit of information, you go out and gather more and distill that down. And then you take that, and then your next incarnation, you do the same thing, and it further gets refined as we go along. And that's why I think some of these moves that the dark magi are doing is because they know this same technique. They know that it takes a few generations to refine a concept. Like if they do it in one incarnation, great, they've got a lot. They got to do that motherfucker 2 more times probably to get something to go, oh, okay, now we have the essence of this. And we could probably do the same thing. I think we do the same thing, but society discourages so much of that. They say, oh, you only live once, you are your body, you're just...
I agree. And I think maybe when you hook into that automatic voice or you connect to that internal guide, that's what you're connecting with. So just to wrap it up, what about if people want to find out more about you or want to connect with you, how would they do that?
Well, come and find me on Facebook, just Jason Robba, Robba is the last name. I'll always add you as a friend if you, or I'll always accept your friend request. I also have a website for my music, which is jasonrobba.com. No spaces or anything, just Jason Robba, one word, .com. We also have the Beyond Room 313 channel on YouTube. We've got it on Facebook and Instagram as well, so you can see what Timothy Thomas and I are up to with Beyond Room 313. And I'm also on Instagram, so find me on social media. I'm always down for a chat, and that's where you can find me out there.
Great stuff. Thanks. My thanks to Jason and to you for listening. This has been another episode of the Magical World of G. Michael Vasey podcast. Please do like, share, and spread it around. Hope it was fun. It certainly was fun for me. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.